Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to episode 2 of Drift0r the Demon Slayer. If you didn't watch episode 1, I would very highly recommend that you go back and check out episode 1. I thought I should let you guys know that the stream was actually so old and from so long ago that I had to open up some old Word files that I had on my computer. Every time I had a really crazy or particularly epic dream, I just had a tendency to write them down, or at least write down all of the main plot points so that I could read it and remember it later. I don't know why I did this, but it's become incredibly useful now as I try and recall all these stories. I had to go back and read through some of this today and remember all the details because this is about to get a little bit more violent. But that's all boring stuff. Let's just skip straight to the story. Straight where I left off is where I told my high school English teacher with my katana and gun in hand that I would agree to kill the demon. And she was really glad to hear this, and I had another question or two for her. I said, okay, so do you have any tips on how to kill this thing? And she looked at me, and my English teacher, Ms. Derp, said that using the pronoun she would be more appropriate because it's a female. And to be honest, it's not actually a demon, but a corrupted human being with magical powers, somehow being assisted by a demon. I believe the worm itself might have been the demon, the flesh worm, but the thing that I was supposed to kill, or the woman that I was supposed to kill, was a human being, or at one time was a human being. They don't, I ask you, what can you tell me about her? She says that she's currently a voodoo priestess, but she's likely to be several hundred years old, and that voodoo is just the most recent thing. She adapted her magic from belief system to belief system over time and used it to destroy people, kill people, just, you know, do whatever she wanted. Evil demon stuff. I didn't really remember all the details. And I asked her, okay, well that tells me what she is, how do I kill her? And Ms. Derp told me that, well, I'm going to have to kill her the brute force way, use the sword, use the bullets, crush her, beat her up, stomp her, anything that you can do, but there's a catch, and the catch is that you have to kill her 3 times. She's got 3 extra lives, kind of like a cat. She's already used some of them, but she's got 3 left. Okay, well that's helpful. Anything else you can help me with, Ms. Derp? Nope, not a thing. I'm like, alright, well, I guess it's time for me to go and try my luck slaying a demon, but this is absolutely going to be the last one. There's not going to be any more demon slaying after this. I'm done. I'm going home. You can keep your sword. God can get somebody else to do this job. And she says, well, wait. Before you go, there's one more thing we need to do. I'm like, oh my god, one more thing, one more piece of information. What is it, woman? She says, we need to say a prayer. Okay, fine, we can say a prayer. So she does a little thing where you face each other and you hold hands. She bows her head and I bow my head, and I wait for the prayer to start, and I wait, and I wait, and I wait. Nothing happens. Open my eyes, probably not supposed to do that during a prayer. Look around. She's not actually saying anything. She's sitting there praying to herself, just hoping that I get the meaning from it somehow. Great, awesome. She's there really awkward for about a minute or two, still holding her hands. When I notice her shift, I'm like, okay, I better duck my head back down and close my eyes. So I do that, and she's like, okay, that's it. And then I pretend to open my eyes and look around like I haven't been doing so the whole time. And I was like, oh, the only thing I could think to say was, you know, thank you for the prayer, and I'll be on my way. And at this point, the dream's going to be getting a little bit more violent and a little bit more descriptive. What happens is the flesh worm crashed down on the high school wing of my building, so I have to walk all the way down the junior high hallway through the study hall in this particular design, and then I open up into the high school wing. And when I walk into the high school wing of the building, it just feels ominous. The lights are out. Well, the lights were out earlier, but it just feels kind of eerily dark in here. But I'm able to see, just not particularly well. Even though it's daylight, it shouldn't be this dark. There should be more, you know, air coming through. Not air, I'm an idiot. Light coming through the windows. There should be light bouncing off of things, but it just feels dark. And I look down toward the end of the hallway, and there's a bright, like, dirty white light coming out of the very end of the hallway double doors. And I can't really see what's going on out there, but I know that's where the flesh worm is. I know that's where the demon is. I know that's where the voodoo priestess, whatever you want to call it, is. That's where I need to go. So I very cautiously and slowly walk up to the double doors. These are very large steel double doors, and look around. And just for your information, they open outward. So to leave the building, I'd have to push the door and walk outward. And I'm just kind of looking around out there, and I can't see anything. There's a white light of some kind out there, and it's being obstructed by a big thick mist, a big swirly mist that allows me to not see jack shit in front of the window, like an inch or two. So it looks like it's going to be a fun fight, and I put my hand on the door to push it open. I push, and right when the lock clicks to open, the entire door explodes, and for some reason somebody is ringing on my doorbell. I'm going to have to put this on hold for a second. Alright, I'm back from the doorbell break. That was actually the UPS driver dropping off a pair of football shoulder pads that I'm going to be using for the Fallout short. Unfortunately, Goodwill probably should have listed what size they were instead of writing unknown, because it actually meant that they are children's, like Pee-wee size, and that I'm going to have to put them on my thigh or something, because they're sure as hell not going to fit on my chest. Back to the story. As soon as I touched the door, it imploded. It broke inwards the way that it shouldn't open, completely off the hinge, all the metal, and hit me really, really hard right in the face, the arm, the chest, sent me flying backwards into the hallway. And I don't know how many of you have been hit by a car, how many of you have been hit in football, how many of you have been pushed down or thrown down. But the way they landed movies, where you roll backwards a time or two, but then catch your feet and slide and maybe like drag a knuckle or two or something, that actually happens from time to time. It's kind of a difficult thing to pull off, but you look kind of badass when you do, or it's difficult to look badass when you're getting knocked down, but that helps. That's what I did. I managed to roll over a time or two and ninja land like a boss. Got my feet planted on the ground, sliding backwards, dragging my knuckles, trying to hang in there. And yeah, that was pretty upsetting. Pretty much hurt my right arm really bad. My hand felt almost crushed. My head was hurting, my back was hurting, my feet were hurting. But in my head, I was still thinking, hey, at least I landed like a total hard ass. So I look up toward the entrance to the hallway to try and see what's going on, what knocked the door down. I'm expecting a giant worm or some like woman flying in with lasers shooting out of her mouth, like, you know, voodoo things. And nothing really happens except the fog. The fog starts moving into the room. It starts drifting and waving in, although I would really hate to give it a, what would I say, a natural kind of description, because the fog moved more like it was sentient, more like it knew what was going on. And it just kind of curved into the hallways like it was feeling the place up and getting a good understanding of the location. And the fog blew all the way into the hallway, and it moved up to me, but it wouldn't get too close to me. It just kind of moved its way around me and kind of felt everything else up. It was like the fog was afraid to touch me for some reason, and I don't, even to this day, I don't really understand why. And then I looked up toward the door, and I noticed that the fog started swirling a little bit more abnormally, as if something was moving through the mist, and in a distance I could see a large, dark mass coming my way, slowly moving through the fog, and out through the fog very quickly and very calmly popped out a very large and old-looking black woman. She, if you've ever had, let's see, I grew up with a black babysitter in the South. They called them, back in the day, this is my grandparents' thing, they called them mammies, something kind of like that. Very large, elderly black woman. We're talking with the watermelon breasts and the gray afro and the cute little granny glasses around her neck and the dress with flowers and all that sort of stuff. Just comes floating through the fog. Nothing menacing about her at all. Looks like a sweet old lady, except for the fact that she's not really walking. She's kind of floating through the fog, and the dress is hanging down. You can't really see her feet like they did in all those creepy old horror movies, like a cheesy effect. But when you see it in real life, you start shitting bricks really quickly. And she wasn't even looking at me, she was looking down, and then when she stopped moving, she was probably about 5, 6, I don't know, no, a little bit more than that. I'd say about 7 or 8 yards away from me. And she looks up at me very slowly with her the face was scary. The face was all in proportion, very old, very sweet, like an old lady you'd see at the nursing home, but there was something wrong with her eyes. Her eyes were just, the whites were way too white. It was like there were no blood vessels in the white part of the eye. The iris was solid red. I'm not talking about dark red. I'm not talking dark brown. I'm not talking glowing red. I'm talking like it looks like she just got a bunch of red food coloring and injected it directly into iris of her eyes and painted it over with gloss paint red. And in the pupil was very, very dark. I guess pupils are always dark, but the whole red thing was really unsettling, and the pupil just looked very dark. She looked up at me, and she said with a voice very unbecoming of an old woman. Imagine an evil old woman, kind of like, I watched that movie, what was that stupid movie, Legion, recently, and in the very beginning that old woman turned into a demon, and she had kind of like a demonic old woman voice, and a voice not that unlike that. She said to me, "Are you the one that has come to kill me?" Or I can't remember. She asked me if I was the one that has come to kill her. And I'm trying to be intimidating, so I chose to give a short answer saying only that I am. She sat there for a second, thinking to herself, looking at me like she was sizing me up, like she was trying to figure out what to do next. And she looked and she thought and she said that this is what she said. She said, "I always believed in fate, and I always laughed at people when they tried to escape their fate, but now I have to do the same," except in the, the demonic evil voice. And as soon as she said that last word, I got slammed really hard. It was something I couldn't even see. It was like the air itself was choking me, just a whole wall of force pushing me down the hallway a couple of feet and then turning to the left and slamming me into a set of lockers. And when I hit the lockers, I hit it so hard that I bent the lockers a little bit. And the sword that I had on my back was actually hurting quite a lot because it was pushing me into the lockers and over the sword and bending my back over and around the sword. But the strength of the sword would not budge. It wasn't bending the sheath, it wasn't bending the blade, it was just bending me around it, which sucked. And all my everything was pushed against the lockers, hands pinned. I felt like a fly pinned in an invisible spider web. And the old voodoo woman very quickly glid through her fog around. I got pinned up against the left side against the locker. She moved around the right to face me face to face, now only a few feet away, and she just kind of smiled and pushed harder and harder. It got harder and harder to breathe, and I couldn't move. At first I could slide my hands along the surface of the lockers, but now they were stuck in place, and it was pushing me more and more, and air was getting more and more difficult to suck in and out of my lungs until one point I realized that I breathed out and then I just couldn't breathe in it anymore at all. There was no air coming in, and that I was very soon going to suffocate. And in this panic state, the only thing that I could think to do was I remembered being able to fly earlier, and I was thinking, I hope to God maybe I can fly out of this. And I just tried to push upward, and I managed to slide upward, flying upward, up toward the ceiling, and get a couple of breaths of fresh air. But the old voodoo woman changed her, I guess, her wall of force accordingly and stopped me just before I hit the ceiling and started pinching from the bottom and the top, pinning me in the air. And I had no clue what to do, but I tried again. I thought maybe I could fool her, and again I tried to slide, and this time I slid to what would be my right, and I slid back into the middle of the hallway, tried to fly. I pushed myself back into the middle of the hallway, and she turned to face me, so that now we were in the exact same position we'd started in, except half the lockers are destroyed, or that particular set of lockers are destroyed, and now I'm pushed back down the hallway. She glared at me, and she roared, revealing a huge set of spiked, like really pointy kind of shark teeth, and began to push, yet again pushing me back down the hallway. But thankfully there was nothing, no wall to push me against, so I wasn't suffocating. And I was trying to stand, but I couldn't stand long, and I managed to put my hands out and try and counterbalance. I'm leaning very, very far forward here. And she began to push more, and the only thing I could think to do was, what would happen if I tried to use my little flying ability to fly forward and just kind of push myself forward? And so I did that. I began to lean forward and push and focus and concentrate, and lo and behold, it seems as if not only was I able to fly, but I was able to fly through telekinesis, because now I seem to have my own little bit of force push to counteract hers to keep me from moving backwards. To get a mental image, if you've ever seen the anime Tetsuo, it would be something similar to that. Not Tetsuo, the Tetsuo is the character, it's Akira, or Akira, however you want to pronounce it. And she has some sort of magical powers, I have some sort of magical powers, both of them manifest in being able to push or pull objects. And I realized that her first attack, she didn't actually intend to kill me, she just kind of wanted to size me up and see what I was capable of, and that it was happening right now. So this next attack would probably be more forceful. She'd be putting a lot more of her energy into it, and I guessed correctly. The push that she was pushing me with was actually a lot stronger than when I was being smushed against the lockers, but now I knew what I was doing. I was able to push back. She would push forward, I would push harder. I would push harder again, push her back. She would push harder more and push me forward. And they began to see, you could see kind of a rift in between it. Not like a big magical blue, red lasers and shit like that, but we were pushing so hard that little pockets of air were getting trapped in between the various pushes, and that they were getting more and more dense. You could actually see the differences, the little waviness in the air, and the ground itself was beginning to crumble and crack, and the hallway was taking damage. And I'm not sure about the physics of this, but little pieces of rubble from the ground, little bits of dust and rock, were getting pushed up from the ground, and as we were pushing each other back and forth, they would kind of float in the air and get ground down to dust and kind of move along that invisible barrier as the little bit pieces of dust get moved along. So you could see the barrier pretty well. It kind of obscured my view of her, but not tremendously. But she was a little bit clever. She, as a tactician, believe it or not, she began to push around the sides. She kept the front barrier the same, because all I was doing is pushing in the front, but I could kind of feel it like an extension of my own body being moved, a sensory feedback sort of thing, that she was pushing around the sides of me, kind of so that my force field was now more like a circle, and that she was moving around from the sides. And when it really passed the 90-degree mark where she was getting behind me, I realized that this was a big problem, and I didn't know what to do. I knew that if I let this continue, she was obviously stronger than me, and even with my ability to push, she would definitely crush me if I just kept playing this brute force war. So the idea that occurred to me was a very risky one, a very dangerous one, and it really should have gotten me killed. I should not have lived past this point, but what I did is I decided to completely collapse my entire force field, my entire ability to push, especially around the sides where I was trying to resist. Just completely let that go, completely let go of the back and everything, and suck it all into a very, very tight ball around my body, just barely big enough for my body, and focus everything forward at one point, just like a little spear, a little sliver, just kind of like pushing straight forward toward her. And what this did was she pushed around insanely quickly, and she intended to crush me from behind. So she actually pushed me from behind. At the same time, I sucked in I just forced straight forward, and my little wedge kind of split her push apart. And I used my natural strength and whatever force push I could to go straight forward, straight at her. At the same time, reach my hand over my back, unsheath the sword, and instead of slashing for some reason, I went straight for the kill, and I stabbed straight forward with my right arm to punch right into her chest, which should have been her left side of her chest, and stab right where her black heart should have been beating. I felt the sword go in, not smooth, a little bit chunky, crunchy, draggy. It punched through something that I believe was supposed to imitate a human rib, but it felt a little bit, I don't know how to say, I felt like I broke a rib weird, but all the parts that they hit didn't really feel that human, or maybe I just haven't stabbed enough people yet. And it punched all the way through, so I'm handle deep in her. The force field collapses around me. So now I'm free to start pushing her backwards, and the eyes change. All the white and all the pupil and everything just kind of bleeds out so that there's nothing but red, and they start to get a little glow, like a little LED backlight going on. And she starts to roar and growl even more, and just roar, louder and louder, and the jaw unhinges. And I see that what I thought was one row of shark teeth is actually many, many rows of shark teeth, kind of like the dune sandworms again. And it just looks like an endless black hole of death. And I didn't know what to do at this point, but she was actually starting to push back, and it felt like I'd really pissed her off. There was a dozen things I could have done. I could have tried to push the sword down and cut her down. I could have pulled out and twisted, or I could have just gone hacky McStabby on her. But instead, I decided to unholster my Desert Eagle with my left hand and move it and put it right up forward and press it right up against her chest, right up against one of those big old lady watermelon breasts, and pull the trigger. The crack of the gun was very, very loud. For those of you that have ever fired guns in real life, you'll know that gunshots don't sound like they do on Call of Duty. They sound like little lightning strikes or little explosions or little firecrackers. That's if you're firing rifles or very large caliber pistols. But that's how they sound. That's the sound it made. And the Desert Eagle is not really a weapon that you're supposed to shoot with one hand, especially not a guy like me who doesn't have like super huge muscles and guns and wrist strength. So it kicked backward pretty bad. My hand was just about pointing at the ceiling, and it hurt my wrist incredibly bad. Just felt like very jarring, like I'd fallen down on the ground and braced myself with my hand and jarred it a little bit. but it really did a number on her. The entry wound honestly wasn't that big, it wasn't that bad, and it blew her backwards off my sword, and I decided to twist and pull as much as I could to do as much damage on the way out. So shot her in the right side, stabbed in the left, and twist and pull on the way out. As she spun around, I got a really good glimpse of what was going on behind her thanks to Mr. Desert Eagle, Mr. 50 caliber Action Express round. And while the entry wound wasn't particularly big, the exit wound was a little bit bigger and a little bit messier than your average coconut. It seems like I'd blown out a shoulder blade, parts of ribs, a lung, a God knows what else, but the blood, instead of being red, was this really dark black kind of stuff, like coagulated blood or like oil, with all sorts of nasty little squirmy things in it strewn all over the floor with chunks of meat and gore and hideousness. And she fell over on the ground and appeared to be incredibly dead at this particular point, and I was feeling pretty confident, pretty good about myself. And then I felt the ground rumbling around me. I felt it starting to kind of shake, and the tiles on the floor started to vibrate. And that's when I remembered the very scary flesh worm that I thought I was going to end up fighting, and I realized that it was coming for me right now. So I used my ability to fly to shoot straight up in the air, straight out of the ceiling like a boss, and out of the way just in time to watch the flesh worm burst up out of the ground, swallow the old woman and half the building whole, and then plow back into the ground and do its sandworm thing and start to try to get away. And that's where this episode is going to end, and I'll be picking up again in a day or two, or I might do the in-depth on the M16 next. I'm not entirely sure, but I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you stick around to see more. Drift0r out.